The godswood of Winterfell was quiet that morning, mist clinging to the thick trunks and lingering over the still pools. Sansa Stark stood beneath the old heart tree, its face weathered by centuries, the red sap trickling from one eye. She traced a pale finger along the worn bark, lost in thought as the ravens quirked overhead. It was spring, or what passed for spring in the north, and the world felt shuddered between old wounds and uncertain hope. The snow was mostly melted, giving way to wet earth and stubborn tufts of green. She breathed deeply, drawing in the scent of moss, sap, and distant smoke. Her father used to say all things could be mended, given time and will. Yet Sansa knew some breaks never healed right. It was the day before the guests would arrive. From her vantage at the godswood's edge, she could see the bustle of preparations in the yards. Cooks roasting pork and seasoning stews, maids stringing garlands of pine and wildflowers, the blacksmith's hammer ringing as if marking out a cadence for the festival to come. The bannermen were already trickling in, their standards snapping in the brisk wind. For all their banners and horses, they were hesitant. Each man and woman eyeing the others, weighing what the North might become, what Stark would become, now that winter was ending and war had passed, leaving scars and opportunities in its wake. She pressed her palm to the heart tree and closed her eyes, remembering Robb, his laughter echoing in the halls, his sword flashing in the yard the tragic way he'd trusted. She remembered Jon too, who had vanished beyond the wall, and Arya, who was gone, wild and free, unreachable as the wind. Bran, the new Lord of Winterfell, remained shut in his tower, lost in riddles and dreams. Sansa was the last of her line to move among the people, to sit in the great hall and judge disputes, to speak for Stark honor in a world that had nearly broken her. Footsteps approached softly over the leaf mold. She opened her eyes, half expecting Maester Wolkin or old Luwin's ghost. But instead it was Brienne of Tarth, clad in simple mail, her blonde hair bound in a braid. Brienne halted, uncertain as always of her place in such gentle moments. "They're nearly finished in the hall, my lady," Brienne said, her voice gentle, roughened by travel and old battle. Lady Baratheon's company was sighted at the last hearth. Sansa almost smiled at the turn of phrase. Lady Baratheon had once been her sister-in-law, now widowed and formidable, journeying with her son Gendry. The thought twisted something in Sansa's chest. Gendry had been Robert Baratheon's bastard, forged in the gutters of King's Landing and tempered in the flames of war. He had earned his place through strength and sweat, had knelt to be legitimized by Jon, had won the Stormlands with his own hammer, and now he came north, summoned by Sansa's letter. She had penned it herself. Her hand steady but her heart wild with uncertainty. The words had been plain, almost cold, as all Stark words were. "You are summoned to Winterfell to discuss alliance, for the good of the realm and the safety of our houses. The North remembers the debt owed to House Baratheon, and seeks to repay it with honor. Come with haste." Yet in her mind, she'd written 100 other things, tangled up with fear, hope, and the iron weight of duty. Sansa turned to Brienne, letting her hand fall from the tree. "Thank you. Are the rooms prepared for the lords of the Stormlands?" "Mendham Satter." "They are, my lady." "Lord Gendry's chamber overlooks the godswood as you requested." Sansa nodded, grateful. Gendry had never seen snow until the long night. He'd spoken once, awkwardly, of how the sight made him feel small and new in the world. She remembered the moment, the way his eyes had lit with awe at the beauty of Winterfell under the aurora. The hint of loneliness behind his blunt words. He was not like the men she'd known in King's Landing, not soft or cruel or clever with lies. There was something honest about him, something unvarnished. Brienne studied her a moment. "If you wish, I can greet him when he arrives." "No," Sansa said. "I'll do it myself. The North is mine to welcome or bar now. And House Baratheon deserves to see our faces, not just our banners." "Memturu." Brienne bowed, satisfied, and left with a sweep of her cloak. Sansa lingered a moment longer beneath the heart tree, gathering herself. She felt the eyes of the old gods on her. She wondered if they judged her, or merely watched, as they always had. through 100 generations of Starks. When she returned to the castle, she found it transformed by the feverish industry of her people. The great hall was resplendent, torches flaring in iron sconces, furs thrown over the benches. The banners of Stark and Baratheon hung side by side. At the dais, her own seat sat beside a new chair, freshly carved from oak, its back shaped in the likeness of a crowned stag entwined with a direwolf. It was a symbol as much as a seat, a promise to the north and the Stormlands that old wounds could be bound with new sinew, that ancient houses could forge something stronger in their union. She paused by the kitchens, where hot pie, broad-faced and flour-dusted, was barking orders at his assistants. He looked up and grinned, white teeth shining. "My lady, will you taste the lemon cakes? I remembered you liked them back in King's Landing. Got lemons from Old Town, I did." Sansa took one, savoring the tang on her tongue. "They're perfect, hot pie. Just as I remember." He beamed, bustling back to his ovens, content to have pleased the Lady of Winterfell. For a moment, Sansa let herself feel the sweetness of it, a memory unmarred by fear or loss. But then the noise of the yard intruded, and she heard the horn blow once, twice, 3 times, the call for guests arriving. Her heart leapt. She walked quickly to the gate, gathering her cloak about her. The wind was sharp, but the sky was blue and full of crows. Outside the gate, the riders came in a long line, Stormland knights in battered mail, their tabards blue and gold, the sigil of the crowned stag flying proud. At their head rode Gendry Baratheon, taller than most, shoulders broad beneath his heavy cloak. His hair was longer now, falling over his brow, and his eyes were bright as hammered steel. He dismounted easily, scanning the courtyard with a craftsman's eye, measuring the stones, the people, the chill in the air. Sansa stepped forward to greet him, every inch the Lady of Winterfell, her face serene, her eyes unreadable. "Lord Baratheon," she said, inclining her head. "Lady Stark." His voice was deeper than she remembered, roughened by wind and war. He knelt, just for a moment, in the mud at her feet, a gesture both of respect and of alliance. "Welcome to Winterfell," she said. "You honor us with your presence." He stood, grinning sheepishly. "Not sure I deserve such honor, my lady. I'm only a blacksmith's son, however many titles they put before my name." Sansa smiled. "Small and private, you are Lord of Storm's End, true-born son of Robert Baratheon. And more than that, you are our guest. The North honors its guests." He nodded, glancing at the crowd gathering in the yard, men and women, old and young, all watching with curiosity. Gendry shifted, uncomfortable with the attention, but faced it head-on. "Your letter said there's talk of alliance, of forging something new." "There is," Sansa said quietly, "but not today. Today you rest and eat, and walk the Godswood if you wish. There will be time enough for talk. Then too." He smiled again, awkward but genuine. "Thank you. I'd like that." She led him inside, the crowd parting before them. The North was slow to trust outsiders, but they recognized strength and honesty when they saw it. Sansa could feel the mood shifting, cautious, hopeful, like the land itself waking after a long, hard winter. The days that followed passed in a kind of suspended anticipation. Feasts were held each night, the tables groaning with roast venison, turnips, and fresh bread. Minstrels played, their songs echoing through the stone halls. Lords of the North mingled with Stormland knights, each side eyeing the other across flagons of mead, trading tales of hardship and triumph. Sansa watched it all with quiet intensity, reading the moods, noting alliances forming in the small things. A shared joke, a gesture of deference, the way old quarrels were set aside in the warmth of firelight. She spent her days walking the castle with Gendry, showing him the battlements and the crypts, the glass gardens and the ancient kitchens. He asked questions about the defenses, about the people, always practical, always thinking of what could be improved. When he visited the smithy, he lost himself in talk of iron and steel, admiring the northern craftsmanship, offering advice to the apprentices. At night, They sat by the fire in the solar, speaking of the past, of Jon and Arya, of Robert's rebellion, of the long night. Gendry confessed he'd never known his father, save in stories, and that his mother had been a mystery, a ghost he chased through memory. Sansa told him of her childhood, of songs and secrets, of the pain and beauty of survival. They spoke quietly, voices low, sharing truths no one else could understand. In Gendry, Sansa saw not a lord or a knight, but a man forged by struggle, as she herself had been. On the third day, as the spring sun melted the last of the ice in the courtyards, Sansa called her council. The great hall was full. Lords and ladies of the north, banners of Stark and Baratheon, the air thick with tension. Gendry stood at her side, uncertain but resolute. "My lords," Sansa began, her voice carrying clear and strong. "The north is strong, but it is not unbreakable. We have weathered wars and betrayals, but the wounds linger. House Baratheon stood with us against the dead. Lord Gendry has shown his loyalty, not only with his sword but with his word. The north remembers." And there was a murmur among the lords, some approving, others wary. "We face new threats," Sansa continued. "Southern lords look northward with envy. The Vale and the Riverlands are restless. The realm is not at peace, not truly, but together we are stronger. I propose an alliance, one bound not only in words, but in blood." Her eyes met Gendry's. He nodded, understanding what she asked. "A marriage," she said, her voice steady. "Between House Stark and House Baratheon. Between myself and Lord Gendry. Let the stag and the wolf run together. Let old debts be paid, and new oaths sworn." The hall erupted. Some in cheers, others in shouted questions, a few in grumbling dissent. Sansa stood firm, letting the storm wash over her. She saw Maester Wolkan scribbling furiously, saw Lady Mormont nod with approval, saw the Karstarks and Umbers conferring in low voices. Gendry stepped forward, his voice carrying over the tumult. "I am no lord born, my lords. I was a bastard once, but I am Baratheon now. I bled for this realm. I'll bleed for it again if need be. Lady Sansa is a Stark. She knows the north. I know the Stormlands. Together, maybe we can build something better than what came before." There was a moment of silence, deep, profound. Then, one by one, the lords began to stand. Lady Mormont, fierce and unbending. Lord Serwyn, old and sharp-eyed. The men of the Stormlands who had followed Gendry through fire and blood. They raised their cups in salute, and slowly, the hall filled with the sound of approval. That night, the castle was alive with celebration. The air was thick with hope, the promise of a new age. Sansa sat beside Gendry at the high table, her hand resting lightly on his, her eyes bright with the future. The next weeks passed in a blur of preparations. Seamstresses worked day and night on Sansa's wedding gown. A gown of winter-white velvet, embroidered with silver direwolves and crowned stags. Gendry wore a doublet of black and gold, his new sigil proudly displayed. The godswood was garlanded with wildflowers and pine boughs, the heart tree watching over them with silent approval. The wedding itself was small, as northern weddings often were. Only the closest kin and the most trusted bannermen. Sansa walked to the heart tree alone, her hair unbound, the last Stark maiden of her line. Gendry waited for her beneath the boughs, his hands shaking with nerves, his eyes full of something like awe. They spoke their vows in the old tongue, binding themselves not only to each other, but to the land and its people. When it was done, Gendry kissed her hand, then her lips, clumsy but sincere. The crowd erupted in cheers, the sound echoing through the godswood, out into the wide world. That night, as the fires burned low, and the stars wheeled overhead, Sansa lay beside her new husband, listening to the sound of his breathing, steady and sure. She felt a strange peace settle over her, a sense that, for the first time, she had chosen her path, not out of duty or fear, but out of hope. Gendry's hand found hers in the darkness, warm and solid. The days after the wedding brought change to Winterfell. Gendry took to his duties with a craftsman's pride, overseeing repairs to the walls, forging new alliances with the Stormland lords. Sansa ruled with wisdom and grace, listening to her people, balancing mercy with justice. Together, they were a force, stronger than either had been alone, tempered by hardship, made new in the fires of adversity. As the spring ripened into summer, the North and the Stormlands grew closer, their banners flying side by side. Trade flourished, roads were mended, old quarrels healed. Word spread out of the new alliance, of the strength and fairness of the Lady and Lord of Winterfell. In time, even the skeptical lords of the Vale and Riverlands sent envoys, eager to secure their own place in the new order. Sansa stood often on the battlements, watching the land unfold before her. Green fields, dark forests, silver streams winding through the hills. Gendry would join her, his arm about her shoulders, his voice low and steady. "We'll build something lasting, Sansa. Something our children can be proud of." She leaned into him, feeling the promise of the future in his words, in the warmth of his embrace. "Yes," she whispered, "we will." And beneath the ancient heart tree, the old gods watched, silent and unmoving, as a new chapter began for House Stark, House Baratheon, and the realm they would shape together. K. In the early light of morning, the scent of dew and blooming wildflowers crept through Winterfell's open windows, softening the scent of ancient stone and the ever-present hearth fires. Sansa sat upright in the great bed that had once been her mother's, the pale curtains billowing like ghosts in the breeze, and watched the sun gild the rooftops and towers with a promise of warmth. She lay with her hands folded, eyes drifting to the movement of shadows, as Gendry breathed beside her, still tangled in dreams after the revel of their wedding night. For a while, she simply watched him. The sturdy build of his shoulders, the tangle of dark hair, the way his brow furrowed, as if even sleep could not quite ease the weight of responsibility he bore. He looked impossibly young in repose, less a lord than the boy he had once been, the apprentice in King's Landing's forges. But his hands, calloused and rough, spoke of the life he had built, one hammered out with labor and loss. Sansa rose quietly, careful not to wake him, and pulled on a robe of thick wool. Her bare feet touched the cold flagstones, grounding her in the present. She crossed to the window and leaned out, gazing over the training yard where the first squires were already forming up, swords glinting as they parried and thrust under the watchful eye of Ser Jorah. The sky was a tender blue, birds busy in the budding trees, and the walls echoed with the distant ring of steel and the lowing of cattle from the outer fields. She was Lady of Winterfell, and now, Lady Baratheon as well. She tasted the words, wondered how long it would take for the world to grow used to them, for her heart to believe them as truth. In her father's time, a marriage was a matter of banners and dowries, oaths and alliances. But for Sansa, it was more her choice, her claim, a hand reaching for the future instead of hiding in the past. She breathed deeply, drawing the chill into her lungs, and felt for the first time that it was truly her home, not merely a refuge from loss. Below, a pair of boys, one a Stark, the other a Baratheon page, darted between the washing lines, chasing a scruffy gray dog. Maester Walken was already tottering toward the library, clutching a satchel of scrolls, and old Nan scolded a serving girl for leaving the bread uncovered. There was a hum in the castle, a sense of new life taking root amid old stones. Sansa left the window and crossed to the dressing table, where her mother's old silver brush lay beside a scattering of hairpins. She worked her hair into a thick braid, pinning it with practiced hands. In the polished glass, her reflection gazed back, pale, solemn, with a hint of color in her cheeks, and eyes blue as the northern sky. She saw her mother's features there, softened by youth, hardened by all she had seen. A gentle knock sounded at the door, and Podrick's voice drifted through, awkward but earnest. "My lady, Lord Gendry asked me to remind you. He's to meet you in the Godswood before the council." "Then ciao." Sansa smiled, grateful for the care Podrick took with every word, every task. "Thank you, Podrick. Please tell Lord Gendry I will join him shortly." As she closed the door behind her, Sansa's thoughts turned to the work that lay ahead. The marriage had been a beginning, but now came the true forging of peace. Letters had arrived from White Harbor and Baratheon, the Vale and River Run, some warm, others wary, all seeking reassurance that the new Baratheon, Stark union was not simply a banner to be waved, but a bond to be tested and trusted. There were supplies to be gathered, roads to be mended, and the lingering bitterness of the South to be soothed. Yet Sansa felt no dread, only resolve, as if her heart had steeled itself in the fires of her own making. The godswood was bathed in gold, dew glittering on every leaf, and the heart tree's red face watching as impassively as ever. Gendry stood waiting, hands folded behind his back, his expression both uncertain and hopeful. He looked up as Sansa approached, his smile shy but true. "You're awake early," he said. "I thought you'd rest after last night." Sansa found herself smiling, warmth blooming in her chest. There's always work to do, even for a newlywed. Or perhaps, especially for one. He grinned, rubbing the back of his neck. "I'd not know. You're my first and only, Sansa Stark." She flushed, but there was pride in it too. "And you are mine, Gendry Baratheon. The only husband I ever chose." He seemed to ponder that, then reached out, taking her hands in his. "I keep thinking I'll wake up and find myself back at the forge, dreaming it all." She squeezed his fingers, steadying him. "It's real. We're here. And the work is just beginning." They walked together beneath the boughs, the hush of the trees enfolding them. Sansa found herself speaking of her plans, how she hoped to reopen the trade route to White Harbor, bringing in southern grain and fine cloth, and how she wished to restore the smithies in the distant mountain villages, where iron and silver could flow once more. Gendry listened intently, his mind already turning over possibilities. "I could send for more apprentices from Storm's End," he said. "They'd bring their own way of doing things, different techniques, southern ideas. It might ruffle some feathers, but we could make Winterfell the best forge in the north, maybe even the realm. And together, we'll see it done," Sansa promised. A raven flapped overhead, settling with a caw on the heart tree. Sansa looked up, her gaze thoughtful. "Do you ever regret leaving the forge?" she asked softly. "The simple work of your hands?" Gendry shrugged, considering. "Sometimes. It was honest work. But I was alone then. Now, well, I'm not alone. There's more to build here than just swords." He touched her cheek, rough thumb brushing a stray lock of hair from her brow. "Whatever we build together. That's all I want." They parted in the yard, each called to separate duties. Sansa to the solar, where Maester Wolkan awaited with letters and ledgers, and Gendry to the smithy, where apprentices already queued with questions about iron and steel. The castle hummed around them, everyone eager to please the new lord and lady, their hope a tangible force in the air. In the solar, Sansa read through the day's missives, her eyes scanning for threats or opportunities. Lady Manderley sent a cask of fine arbor gold and a polite warning that the Lannisters had begun to strengthen their hold in the Westerlands, hiring sellswords and stockpiling food. Lord Royce of the Vale sent word that his knights stood ready to ride if called, but asked careful questions about the intentions of the new alliance. Sansa wrote back with her own assurances, firm but never obsequious, her signature as bold and unyielding as the direwolf's head. She broke her fast with Lady Lyanna Mormont, who perched like a sparrow on the bench beside her, sharp-eyed and quick-tongued as ever. "You've made a good match, Lady Sansa," Lyanna pronounced, spearing a hunk of bread with her knife. "A strong arm for a strong house, but don't let him forget which wolf leads the pack." Sansa laughed, soft and genuine. "I doubt I could, even if I tried. Gendry knows the North is my home, and that I'll not be led by any man, but he is strong, and he listens, a rare quality." Lyanna nodded, satisfied. "So long as you remain a Stark first. The North follows wolves, not stags." Later, as Sansa presided over petitions in the Great Hall, she found herself fielding questions that cut to the heart of the new order. Lord Glover demanded assurance that his grain stores would be prioritized come winter. Lady Hornwood sought protection from bandits on the King's Road. Even the small folk sent their concerns, Requests for new ovens, for winter seeds, for medicine for sick children. Sansa listened to each in turn, weighing the needs of her people against the resources at hand. When the council met that afternoon, the chamber was full. Gendry sat at her side, flanked by Brienne and Ser Jorah. Maester Walken spread out maps and documents. His ink-stained fingers trembling with excitement. They discussed trade, repairs, alliances, the 100 details that made up the life of the North. "We need more masons if we're to repair the outer wall before next snow," Gendry said, tapping the map with a thick finger. "Storm's End can send some men, but we'll need coin." "We'll find it," Sansa replied, calm and assured. "If we must, I'll open the Stark vaults. Winterfell stands and must stand strong." Brienne raised a hand. "There are rumors from the Riverlands. Outlaw bands, led by men who once rode with the Brotherhood. They've raided as far north as the Green Fork." "Man sorrow." Gendry's face darkened. "I knew some of those men. They're desperate, but they'll bleed the countryside dry if left unchecked." Sansa nodded. "We'll send riders, trusted men, with food and coin. Offer clemency to any who lay down arms. If they refuse, deal with them as outlaws." The council moved on to other matters, but beneath it all was the growing sense of unit. A new force taking shape, the forging of something that might outlast the old hatreds and betrayals. As the council broke, Sansa caught Gendry's hand beneath the table, squeezing gently. "Thank you," she whispered, "for standing with me." He smiled, his eyes bright. "I'd stand with you against the world." That night, the great hall was quieter, the revel subdued after the wedding's wild celebration. Gendry joined Sansa by the fire, stretching his legs and sipping wine. She curled beside him, her head on his shoulder, the warmth of the hearth banishing the night's chill. They spoke of the future, of children, of roads, of the dream of peace. "I want our children to know both north and south," Sansa said. "To run in the snow and swim in the summer seas. To know they are both wolf and stag and belong to both." Gendry nodded, his face alight with hope. "They'll be strong like you, proud like the North. And if I have my way, they'll know the Forge too, what it means to shape something with your own hands." They fell into a comfortable silence, listening to the crackle of the fire and the distant sounds of the keep. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the shutters. Sansa watched the flames dance, thinking of all the dangers still lurking beyond their walls. The ambitions of the Lannisters, the schemes of the Reach, the wildness of the Vale. Yet here, in this moment, she allowed herself hope. The Baratheon-Stark alliance was new, untested, but it was real. It was theirs. In the weeks that followed, Winterfell grew busier still. Messengers rode in daily, bringing news and supplies from Storm's End, from White Harbor, from the distant Dreadfort. The market swelled with traders, southern wines, northern pelts, Dornish spices, and even the delicate glass of Liss. Sansa ordered new wells dug and the walls reinforced, determined that her people would never again face starvation or siege. Gendry walked the yards, sleeves rolled, hammer in hand, helping where he could and earning the grudging respect of the old guard. The smithy became a place of pride, fires burning night and day. Gendry oversaw the making of new plows for the spring planting and blades for the guard. He trained the apprentices himself, teaching them not only the secrets of the forge, but the value of patience, the necessity of care. Sometimes Sansa watched him from a distance, heart full at the sight of a lord who would not ask his men to do what he would not do himself. As summer deepened, Sansa called a great council, inviting lords from the north, the Vale, the Riverlands, even from the Reach and Stormlands. They gathered beneath banners new and old, the great hall thrumming with voices, the air charged with the possibility of peace or peril. Sansa spoke first, her voice carrying above the crowd. "The wars have left us all weakened. The old kings are gone, and the realm needs healing, not more blood. The Baratheon-Stark alliance stands for unity, for justice, for a realm where no child fears winter or war." Namen see. Some lords nodded, others muttered. But Gendry rose at her side, lending his strength to her words. "My father's throne was won with a hammer, but kept with a sword," he said, his voice ringing with conviction. "That time is past. We have a chance now to build something better, together. We owe it to those we lost, and to those yet to come." Debate raged long into the night. Over coin, over trade, over borders and blood feuds. But Sansa and Gendry held firm, offering compromise where they could, standing unbending where they must. By dawn, they had won more than they had lost. The North would remain free, the Stormlands allied, the Vale and Riverlands pledged to mutual defense. It was not perfect, but it was a beginning. That morning, Sansa stood again in the Godswood, sunlight streaming through the branches. Gendry found her there, as he always did, and they walked together in silence. When they stopped beneath the heart tree, Gendry turned to her, eyes full of wonder. "Do you ever doubt," he asked softly, "that we can do this, that it will hold?" Sansa considered, her gaze steady. "I doubt many things. But not you. Not us. So long as we stand together, the realm will see what can be forged from hope." He kissed her then, under the watchful eyes of the old gods, sealing the promise between them. The wind whispered through the leaves, and somewhere far above, a raven took flight, wheeling into the clear blue sky. And in that moment, Sansa felt the old wounds close, not erased, but made into scars, proof of survival and of the strength that comes from choosing, again and again, to hope. The Baratheon-Stark alliance was not merely a bond of houses, but a covenant of hearts, a promise hammered and shaped by the hands of two survivors. And as the seasons turned, and peace blossomed in the shadow of old grief, Sansa Stark and Gendry Baratheon stood side by side, unbowed and unbroken, ready to build a new world together. As dusk fell over Winterfell, a hush came upon the castle that was at once ancient and new. In the great hall, the fires burned low, sending embers up into the blackened beams. Sansa found herself alone at the high table, her wine untouched, parchment letters fanned before her like so many cards in a game of chance. She listened to the footsteps of servants and the gentle clatter from the kitchens, her mind drifting between hope and fear as she read over the latest missive from Lord John Royce of the Vale. He congratulated her on her wedding, spoke of his respect for her father, and then, beneath the courtesy, expressed his apprehension at the growing power of Winterfell. There was flattery and warning, promise and threat, woven together as deftly as any mummer's play. The old lords of the Vale had not forgotten the days when the Eyrie looked down on a broken north, and their pride was a brittle thing. Sansa set the letter aside and pressed her knuckles to her lips, thoughtful. Gendry would return soon. He'd gone to the smithy for a final round of inspections, and she could still hear the echo of his laughter with the apprentices ringing in her memory. The warmth of his presence lingered even in his absence, and she found herself longing for his voice to break the quiet. It was a new kind of longing, gentler than the yearning that had ruled her childhood, fiercer than the brittle hope she had clung to as a girl in King's Landing. She wanted not rescue, nor even romance, but partnership, a rare and precious thing. When he entered, boots dusty and hair wild, he looked for her first, his blue eyes finding hers through the half-light. He strode to the dais, clumsy in a way that made the ladies of court hide their smiles behind their hands, and dropped onto the bench beside her, warm and solid. He smelled of ash and steel in the cold north air. "Tired?" she asked softly, brushing a stray curl from his brow. He grinned, teeth white in the gloom. "Not tired. Satisfied. They're good lads. Those apprentices. Never saw such hunger to learn, not even in King's Landing. One of them, Edric, reminds me of myself at that age. Eager and stubborn. Nams." She watched the way he spoke, the ease he brought with him, and felt her cares lighten. "It's good for them to see their lord at work. You do more to unite this castle with a hammer than most could with a crown." He shook his head, laughing quietly. "I'm no lord in my heart, Sansa. I'm trying, for you. For Winterfell. I want to be worthy." She touched his hand, feeling the roughness of calluses, the strength there. "You are worthy. The North respects strength and honesty, not gold and silk. You lead by example, and they will follow. He turned her hand over, studying her fingers as if seeing them anew. You still read all the letters yourself? I must. Each word is a stone in the wall we're building. If I miss one, the whole wall might crack. He nodded, understanding more than she expected. I never liked letters. Too easy to say one thing and mean another. Them? She smiled, then handed him Lord Royce's letter. What do you make of this? He frowned, reading it aloud in a halting way, sounding out the meaning behind the words. He wants to be sure we're not coming for the Vale, that we'll leave his lands alone if he leaves ours alone. He wants peace, but on his terms. Sansa felt a thrill of pride at his insight. You see it clearly. I'll write him myself, reassure him that the North and the Stormlands seek friendship, not conquest, and will invite him to send his ward to Winterfell for fostering. A boy of the Vale growing up here, learning alongside our own, he will carry home a respect for what we are building. Gendry grinned. A good plan. And maybe, in time, we can send our own to Storm's End or the Eyrie. Spread our roots, like a tree. Now. Exactly so, she said, feeling a new certainty settle over her. We must give them reason to trust us. A servant entered then, bowing low. My lady, Lord Gendry, the child from Molestown has arrived. She asks for your judgment. Sansa exchanged a look with Gendry. Bring her here, and let no one disturb us. A few moments later, the girl was led in. A skinny thing, shivering in a too-big cloak, hair tangled, eyes wary and bright. She curtsied, awkward but proud, and waited, chin high. Sansa came down from the dais, kneeling so their eyes met. What is your name? Elsa, my lady. You sought our protection. Why? My brother and me. We ran from the men in the hills. They took my mother. We hid in the woods 3 days. He's sick, but I got him here. Please. We have nowhere else. Sansa's heart ached. She took the girl's hands. You're safe now. Your brother will be tended in the healer's hall. You will have food, shelter, and honest work. No harm will come to you in Winterfell. Thou. Tears glittered in the girl's eyes. Thank you, my lady. I can clean, or spin, or we'll find a place for you, Gendry said, his voice gentle. I'll see to your brother myself. Go with the servant, rest and eat. The girl curtsied again, gratitude radiating from her, and allowed herself to be led away. Sansa stood, pressing her hand to her heart. We have so many now, Gendry. The lost, the desperate, the broken. Winterfell is filling with those who have nowhere else to go. He shrugged. That's what we're here for, isn't it? To build something better. She nodded. But the lords will resent it if we draw too many mouths to feed. We must find work, give them purpose. Let me have the strong ones for the smithy. The clever ones can go to the stewards or the kitchens. It'll be a hard winter for all of us, but we'll manage. So long as you lead, Sansa, they'll follow. Damn. She smiled, moved by the steadiness in his tone, and they stood together in the quiet, the promise of the future settling over them like a benediction. Later that week, riders arrived from the Dreadfort, bearing gifts and veiled threats. Lord Serwyn sent an ornate box of carved bone, and with it, a message. His daughter sought a place among Sansa's ladies, as insurance that House Serwyn would remain close to Winterfell's heart. Sansa accepted with measured courtesy, placing the girl, a clever, sharp-tongued thing called Isabel, among her own maids. Isabel watched everything with wide eyes, absorbing secrets and gossip, but Sansa welcomed her. Better a spy in plain sight than one in the shadows. Letters came from Storm's End too. Lady Shira, Gendry's cousin, requesting aid for her failing orchards, a smith begging for new tools, a knight disgraced by defeat seeking redemption in the North's hard wars. Gendry handled these himself, dictating replies, arranging for supplies to be sent south. The lines between North and South grew blurred with each passing day. Coin and letters flowing like water, shared hardships weaving a tapestry stronger than old rivalries. As summer waned, Sansa took to riding through the fields beyond the walls, watching the progress of the crops, the repair of roads, the construction of new homes for the refugees who had flocked to her banner. Gendry rode with her when he could, sometimes in silence, sometimes talking of things that mattered only to them. How best to teach a frightened child to wield a sword, how to mend the trust between bannermen scarred by old betrayals, how to honor the memory of the dead without being ruled by grief. One evening, they rode out to the Barrowlands, the sun setting in waves of gold and crimson across the fields. Sansa drew her horse to a halt on a low ridge, the wind snapping her cloak. "This land has seen so much blood," she murmured, looking out over the hills. "Robb fought here, and before him my grandfather, and his father before him. And yet the grass grows again, every spring." Gendry dismounted, walking to stand beside her. "Maybe that's all we can do, make sure something grows back after the storms. It won't ever be the same, but it might be better." "Then shall." She took his hand, comforted by the rough strength of his grip. "Do you ever wonder what it would be like if we had met in another life? If you'd never left the Forge, if I'd never left Winterfell?" He grinned. "Sheepish. I'd have been too shy to speak to a great lady like you, and I would never have noticed a blacksmith's son, no matter how strong his arms." He laughed, pulling her close. "But I'm glad it happened as it did, hard as it was. We are what we are because of it." They lingered there until the light faded, two shapes against the endless sky, before turning home to the warmth and noise of the castle. The days shortened as autumn approached, and with the harvest came new worries. Rumors drifted from the Riverlands of a rising bandit king, Sir Arwood Vance, calling himself Lord of the Trident, promising bread to the hungry and vengeance to the dispossessed. His banners were ragged, but his cause was righteous, and desperate men flocked to him. Sansa convened her council, the room tense as the first frost. "If he succeeds," she said, "he will draw every hungry man from the Reach to the neck, and the lords will look to us to put him down. We cannot fight every rebel," Brienne cautioned, voice grave. "But we cannot let the Riverlands burn either." Gendry considered, jaw set. "If we strike too soon, we look like oppressors. Too late, and the lords say we're weak. We must send envoys." Sansa decided. "Meet with this Sir Arwood. Offer terms, land, food, a place for his men if they lay down their arms. If he refuses, we act together, North and Stormlands, and the Vale if they will join us." Then a messenger was dispatched that night, bearing Sansa's offer. In the days that followed, the mood in Winterfell shifted from hope to unease. The small folk whispered, the lords muttered, and even the crows seemed restless. Gendry grew grim, taking longer hours at the forge, his eyes shadowed with worry. Sansa tried to reassure him, but she felt the weight of leadership pressing in on all sides. One evening, as she walked the walls, she found herself joined by Arya. Her sister returned from the wild, silent as a shadow, hair cropped short and eyes too old for her face. "You did not tell me you were home," Sansa said softly, fighting back tears. Arya shrugged, looking out over the night. "You had work to do. Besides, I like coming and going. No one expects me." Sansa laughed, shaky with relief. "Will you stay?" "For a while. I wanted to see what you were building. You're doing well, Sansa. The people love you." "Do they?" Sansa's voice trembled. "Or do they only need me?" Arya considered. "Both. But that's enough. You're stronger than you know." They stood together in silence, the wind singing over the battlements, until Arya slipped away into the darkness, leaving Sansa with the comfort of her presence and the ache of her absence. Winter arrived early that year, and with it, Sir Arwood's answer, a refusal bold and angry. Sansa read his letter in the solar, her heart heavy. Gendry stood beside her, his jaw tight. "We must move quickly," she said. "Send word to the Vale and the Riverlands. We march together or not at all. The lords gathered their banners, the yard filling with the thunder of hooves and the clatter of steel. Gendry rode at the head, his armor plain, but his presence unmissable. Sansa watched him go, pride and fear warring in her chest. The campaign was brief and bloody. Arwood's men fought like wolves, desperate and cornered. But Gendry's hammer broke their lines, and the Vale Knights rode them down. The North held the bridges, the Stormlanders the fords, and in the end, Arwood was captured, brought in chains to Winterfell's hall. Sansa received him on the dais, her gaze level. You defied the peace we offer. You sowed chaos and fear. Yet I will show mercy, for the sake of the realm. Swear your loyalty, accept my judgment, and you may live. Arwood knelt, battered and beaten, but proud. I will swear, my lady, but I ask, do not forget the hungry. Do not forget those who followed me because they had nothing else. Sansa nodded. Solemn, I will not forget. With the rebellion ended, peace returned. Brittle, but real. The Riverlands pledged fealty. The Vale reaffirmed their alliance, and Sansa's name grew in renown. The refugees were put to work, rebuilding what war had broken. And the land began, slowly, to heal. In the quiet that followed, Sansa and Gendry found themselves together more often. In the Godswood, at the forge, in the hush of their private chambers, they spoke little of the past, less of the future, and instead savored the fragile peace they had wrought with their hands and hearts. One night, as snow fell soft and silent outside their window, Sansa lay beside Gendry, her head on his chest, listening to the steady drum of his heart. I'm with child, she whispered, barely daring to believe it. He turned to her, wonder and fear mingling in his eyes. A child? Ours? She smiled, tears shining. Yes, ours. Then he held her close, his arms strong and sure. We'll raise them here in peace, no matter what comes. She clung to him, hope rising in her chest like the first sunrise after a long night. Winter would come again, and with it, new trials. But for now, in the safety of Winterfell, beneath the banners of wolf and stag entwined, Sansa Stark and Gendry Baratheon dreamed together of a realm renewed, and the legacy they would leave for those yet to come. Snow sifted through the night, soft and endless, cloaking Winterfell in a hush that muffled hoofbeats and the clatter of distant forges. Sansa watched from the window in her solar, one hand pressed to her stomach, the other curled around a cup of honeyed wine left to cool by her elbow. The courtyard below was a tapestry of lantern light, men and women moving through the flurries with purpose, some carrying bundles of firewood, others with fresh straw for the stables. The world had grown smaller with winter's return, the days brief, and the nights stretching on forever. She found herself grateful for the walls, for the closeness that forced her people together, even as she worried for the ones who might slip through the cracks. It was well past midnight when the door creaked open. Gendry entered, brushing snow from his shoulders, his cheeks flushed by the cold. He grinned as he saw her, shaking his head so the flakes fell from his hair like tiny diamonds. You'll catch cold, she teased, standing and crossing the flagstones to greet him. Even a Baratheon isn't made for northern winters. He pulled her into his arms, warm and solid, and she let herself rest against his chest for a long moment, listening to the rhythm of his heart. It's not so bad, he murmured, lips brushing her hair. You warm me well enough. They stood there, quiet, content in the hush. Then he pulled back, brow furrowing with concern. You've not slept? Sansa shook her head, managing a smile. The babe is restless tonight. Or perhaps it's just me. There's always something on my mind, something needing tending. Gendry bent and kissed her brow, gentle as ever. You don't have to do it all alone, you know. She touched his cheek, tracing the faint scar by his jaw. I know. But I am Lady of Winterfell, and now of the Baratheon alliance too. There is never a moment without consequence. I must be ready. Menetrand. He drew her back to the window, both of them watching as the snow drifted. I've spoken with Edric and the other apprentices, he said quietly. "They've ideas for new plows come spring. Stronger, lighter, iron from the forges at Storm's End, shaped here in the north. They want your blessing." "Of course," Sansa said. "We will need every field to flourish next season. If we are to feed all those who follow us, we cannot do as we did before. We must think beyond our borders." He nodded, watching her, pride in his eyes. "You're changing the north, Sansa. I don't think your father could have dreamed what you'd become." She looked down, emotion tightening her throat. He would have wanted peace. "I hope in his own way he'd be proud." Gendry's hand slipped over hers, grounding her. "He would. And so am I." They sat together by the hearth, the flames painting their shadows on the walls. Outside, the wind moaned against the stone, but inside, all was warmth. Sansa found herself talking of small things. The taste of the honeycakes cook had sent up that morning. The quiet cleverness of young Isabel Serwyn. The way the old gods' faces seemed to change with every snowfall. Gendry listened, laughter rumbling in his chest at her stories. Until finally her eyes drifted shut, exhaustion claiming her. He carried her gently to their bed, tucking the furs around her, and sat by her side until her breathing evened. Only then did he let himself rest, his hand never leaving hers, the promise of a future binding them closer than any oath. As the days passed, the snow deepened, and the world slowed. News arrived more rarely, ravens sometimes delayed by storms, but Winterfell's halls grew busier nonetheless. The healers' quarters were filled with the sick and the wounded, many of them refugees from the recent skirmishes in the Riverlands. Sansa walked the halls daily, offering comfort and command in equal measure, her presence a balm to those who had lost much. Arya reappeared one morning, snow-dusted and wild-eyed, her face shadowed but alight with mischief. She found Sansa in the kitchens, watching cook knead dough with a practiced hand. Arya plucked a hot roll from the oven and grinned, crumbs dusting her chin. "You're fattening up the north." She said, voice teasing. Sansa laughed, relief and love blooming in her chest. "I need them strong. There are mouths to feed and work to be done. Even you must eat." Arya's gaze softened. "I will. For a while. But then, I'll be off again." "Nenda." Sansa took her hand, squeezing gently. "I know. Just come back when you can." Arya leaned in, pressing a quick kiss to Sansa's cheek. "Always." The days followed one another, a quiet rhythm of small victories and persistent worries. Maester Walken brought reports from the Riverlands, the bandits broken but not gone. Lords maneuvering for favor, always watching the north for signs of weakness. Gendry met often with his captains, planning patrols and keeping the peace. On the coldest night of the season, Sansa was awakened by pain. Sharp, insistent, rolling through her in waves. She tried to rise quietly, but Gendry was beside her in an instant, panic and devotion mingling in his eyes. "It's time," he whispered, voice cracking. She nodded, sweat beading her brow. He wrapped her in a heavy cloak, carried her to the birthing room where old Nan and the healers waited. The castle stirred as word spread, servants lighting fires and tending candles, bannermen waiting in the halls for news. The labor was long, stretching through the hours of darkness and into the gray of morning. Sansa bore it with the strength of every Stark woman before her, teeth gritted, hands clutching the furs, eyes blazing with pain and resolve. Gendry stayed with her, holding her hand, his face pale but steadfast. Arya hovered nearby, silent as a shadow, eyes bright with tears she would never let fall. When the dawn finally broke, it did so with a child's cry, thin and furious and impossibly alive. Sansa wept, joy and exhaustion mingling as they placed the babe in her arms. A daughter, small and fierce, with tufts of black hair and eyes, the gray of storm clouds. Gendry knelt by the bedside, tears slipping down his cheeks. "She's beautiful," he whispered. Sansa cradled the child, brushing her lips across her tiny brow. "Alysanne," she murmured, the name an echo of old queens and new hope. Alysanne Baratheon of Winterfell. Word spread quickly, laughter and cheers rising in the halls as the news was carried to every corner of the castle. Old Nan proclaimed it a lucky birth, the start of a new spring. Maester Walken recorded the name in the great book, his script trembling with joy. For days, the keep celebrated. Banners of wolf and stag were woven together, feasts held in the great hall. The lords of the north and the Stormland sent gifts, fine furs, silver cups, a carved cradle from Storm's End inlaid with gold. Sansa received them all graciously, holding her daughter close, the promise of the future warm against her skin. With Alysanne's birth came a new sense of unity. The lords who had doubted began to send their children for fostering, eager to tie their fortunes to the growing power of the Baratheon Stark alliance. The smithy rang with the sound of new tools and weapons, apprentices working day and night to fill the orders flooding in from every corner of the realm. Sansa found herself busier than ever, settling disputes, negotiating trade, hearing petitions from the smallfolk. Gendry took on more duties as well, leading the patrols that kept the roads safe, meeting with the masters of the villages to ensure no one went hungry. Together, they made the rounds of the outlying lands. Alysanne swaddled against the cold, their bannermen at their backs. One evening, as spring began to melt the last of the snows, Sansa rode with Gendry to a small village north of the last river, where a bridge had been washed out in the thaw. The villagers greeted her with awe and gratitude, their children running to touch her cloak, their elders bowing low. A council was called, and Sansa listened as the headman spoke of hardship, fields ruined by flood, cattle lost to wolves, supplies dwindling. Gendry listened too, then knelt in the mud to inspect the damage himself. Sleeves rolled as he spoke with the men about timbers and iron. "We'll send supplies from Winterfell," Sansa promised, "and men to help you rebuild. In the meantime, you'll have grain from our stores and seed for planting when the land is ready." The villagers wept, overcome, and swore their loyalty anew. That night, Sansa sat with the women by the hearth, listening to songs and stories, while Gendry shared ale with the men, laughter echoing long after the moon rose. They returned to Winterfell the next day, tired but content, Alysanne sleeping in Sansa's arms. As the gates closed behind them, Sansa looked up at the old stones, feeling the weight of her legacy and the promise of the future balanced in her heart. There were still threats, rumors from the south of a Lannister resurgence, whispers that the Reach might seek to break the alliance with gold and marriage offers. But the North stood strong, its people united by more than fear or ambition. Sansa felt it in every council meeting, every feast, every ride through the fields. She was building something lasting, something greater than any crown. That summer, as the first wildflowers bloomed along the walls, Sansa called another great council. Lords and ladies gathered from every corner of the north and the Stormlands, the banners of Baratheon and Stark fluttering side by side. Gendry stood beside her, Alysanne in his arms, pride and hope shining in his eyes. Sansa addressed them all, her voice clear and strong. "We have known war and hunger. We have lost much, but together we have built peace. Let us hold it fast. Let us share its bounty, not hoard it. Let us prove that wolf and stag, north and south, can be more than banners. They can be a promise kept." The hall rang with applause, the lords rising in salute, the ladies dabbing their eyes. It was not only respect they offered, but trust. Hard-won and fragile, but real. That night, after the feasting was done and the castle lay quiet, Sansa stood on the ramparts with Gendry, watching the stars wheel overhead. The air was cool, carrying the scent of pine and distant smoke. Alysanne slept in her cradle, safe in the nursery. The world felt full of possibility. "You've given them hope," Gendry said quietly. Sansa turned to him, her heart full. "We did together, and we'll keep it, no matter what comes." He drew her close, and they stood in silence, watching the dawn break over Winterfell. New light, new life, new dreams blooming from the ashes of the old. The world beyond their walls might yet be uncertain. But here, beneath the banners of wolf and stag, there was peace and love, and the promise that together, They could weather any storm. As the new summer stretched its green arms over the north, Winterfell grew louder with life and the steady hum of purpose. The castle had never known such a confluence of banners. Blue and gold of Baratheon, gray and white of Stark, flanked by the standards of Manderley Hornwood, Serwyn, Tallheart, and the Black Falcon of the Vale, sent by Jon Royce as a pledge of goodwill. The yards rang with the clangor of swords and laughter, the workshops alive with smith songs and the swift rhythm of loom and spindle. In the kitchens, hot pies apprentices roasted river trout and simmered barley stew, their voices blending with the clatter of pots and the music of the harpist brought from White Harbor for the long summer nights. Sansa walked the castle with Alysanne pressed close to her breast, the infant's dark head resting beneath her chin as she moved among her people, hearing disputes, giving blessing, pausing to smile at the new foals in the stables or the children chasing each other along the sun-warmed battlements. The north, for a time, was gentle. Its wounds had scabbed over. The land itself seemed to heal. Grass growing thick on old battlefields, wildflowers brightening the cairns of the fallen. Even the air was softer, scented with pine and the warm loam of earth newly turned for planting. The council met each morning in the solar, the table piled with maps, letters, and fresh bread. Gendry presided with her, his voice carrying as he spoke of iron shipments from Storm's End and the need for more ships to carry grain up the White Knife. Lady Lyanna Mormont argued for more patrols in the west, wary of bandits from the mountains, while Maester Wolkan brought news of a flux in births and a shortage of midwives in the villages. Sansa listened, guiding the debate with a quiet word or a tilt of her head, offering judgment when needed, compromise where it could mend more than division. Sometimes Arya would appear on the edge of things, silent and sly, eyes darting between faces, vanishing before the meeting ended, leaving only the faintest hint of mischief in her wake. On a day thick with sun and promise, word arrived from the south. Lord Mace Tyrell had died, and the new Lord of Highgarden was young and untested, his reach for alliances already sending ripples through the courts of Old Town and the Stormlands. Sansa read the letter aloud, her voice calm. The Tyrells seek marriage for their new lord, a pledge to bind the Reach and their neighbors. They have asked for a Stark or a Baratheon, one of our blood. Gendry raised an eyebrow, grinning at the absurdity. I doubt they mean me. Sansa's mouth quirked. Or our daughter, thank the gods. She passed the letter to Lady Mormont, who scoffed. Let them look elsewhere, Lyanna said. We have no daughters to spare, and the Reach has never done the North any favors. Maester Wolkan, ever cautious, cleared his throat. It might be wise to send a reply, cordial but non-committal. A gift, perhaps. Let them see we are neither cowed nor careless. Sansa nodded, mind already turning over possibilities. A cask of last year's ice wine, a dozen blades from our forge, with the wolf and stag entwined. They'll read the message well enough. We are strong and generous and not easily drawn into games that do not suit us. Now, when the meeting ended, Gendry lingered as the others filed out. He drew Sansa to the window, Alysanne sleeping soundly between them, and looked out over the training yard where young men of the North and Stormland sparred beneath banners snapping in the wind. You think the peace will last? He asked quietly. Sansa watched the dust rising beneath the boy's boots, the sunlight glinting off steel. I think we must act as if it will, and prepare as if it won't. That is all any ruler can do. He squeezed her hand, fingers strong and sure. You never doubt? I doubt every day, Sansa replied, her gaze never leaving the yard. But I also hope. I choose hope. I choose you, our daughter, our home. And I will choose it again and again, no matter what comes. Now. That afternoon, Sansa rode out with Gendry to the fields beyond the walls. Alysanne swaddled close as a half-dozen guards trailed at a respectful distance. The barley stood waist-high, the wheat already golden at the edges. In a clearing, a ring of young trees had been planted, a living monument to those lost in the long night, and to the union that had brought peace at last. Villagers gathered to greet them, the elder leading a chorus of thanks. their voices raised in a song that Sansa only half remembered from her childhood. She stood among them, the warmth of their welcome as real as the sun on her shoulders, and listened as the headman spoke of new hope, a repaired mill, a school built of stone, a well dug deeper so that no child would go thirsty when drought returned. Gendry knelt to inspect the mill's new wheel, talking with the blacksmith about the best shape for iron teeth. And Sansa found herself caught by the sight. Her husband in plain clothes, sleeves rolled, dirt under his nails, his laughter ringing through the air like a promise. The people trusted him, not for his blood or his banners, but because he stood among them as one of their own. They returned to Winterfell as twilight thickened, Alysanne drowsy against Sansa's shoulder. In their private rooms, they sat together before the fire, the world beyond their walls growing still. Gendry poured wine, setting his cup aside as Alysanne was placed in her cradle, and Sansa stretched her feet toward the flames, a rare moment of quiet in her heart. "You never dreamed of this, did you?" she asked, voice low. Gendry shook his head, grinning. "Not in 1,000 years. Not even in my wildest dreams." "Then?" She leaned into him, content. "Nor I, but I would not trade it for anything." He pulled her close, their foreheads touching. "Nor I, Sansa Stark. Nor I." Summer's long days brought new faces to Winterfell. Envoys from the Vale, the Riverlands. Even a Lannister cousin come north to negotiate for trade. The halls were alive with voices, the air thick with the smell of roses and spice, the kitchens a chaos of feasts and laughter. Sansa received the visitors with grace, her daughter in her lap, Gendry at her side. She listened to their words, offered them gifts and honest counsel, and watched as even the most hardened Southerners softened beneath her gaze. Arya reappeared for a night, trading stories with the knights and slipping gold into the hands of a girl whose family had fled the wars. Lady Lyanna sparred with a Lannister cousin, bruising his pride more than his skin. While hot pies bred won hearts faster than any treaty, there were moments of tension, a quarrel between a Stark bannerman and a knight of the Stormlands. Old rivalries rising in a burst of fists and shouting, quickly quelled by Gendry's calm command. Later, Sansa found herself mediating between the sons of rival houses, reminding them of what had been lost and what could be gained if peace was kept. When the visitors departed, they left behind pledges of trade, talk of marriages to come, and, most precious of all, a sense that the realm might truly be knitting itself together, slow as winter thaw, but just as inevitable. As the moon waned and swelled, Sansa spent more time in the Godswood, her daughter learning to crawl beneath the watchful eyes of the old heart tree. Gendry joined them when he could, sometimes bringing a puzzle of wood or a hammered ring for Alysanne to grasp and gnaw. The girl was strong and quick, her laughter bright as bells, her gaze sharp as her mother's. One morning, Arya appeared with a hawk perched on her wrist, its feathers dark as night. She watched as Alysanne toddled toward her, fearless, hands outstretched. "She's got your courage," Arya said, ruffling the baby's hair, "and your stubbornness." "She'll be a terror before she's 5, Sansa smiled, lifting Alysanne into her lap. "Shall be what she will. All we can do is give her a safe home to grow in." Arya's eyes darkened. "The world doesn't stay safe for long, Sansa." "No," Sansa replied. "But, while it does, we must savor it." They sat together in the dappled shade, the silence between them as easy as breath. Arya left that night, vanishing with the dawn. But Sansa felt her presence lingering, a comfort against the uncertainties still lurking beyond the walls. Autumn crept in on red leaves and cool winds, and with it came word of unrest in the Westerlands, a distant cousin of the Lannisters gathering mercenaries, talk of a new banner raised against the peace of the realm. Sansa called her council at once, Gendry at her side, the lords of the north and the Stormlands filling the room with tension. "We cannot march at every rumor," Lady Mormont argued. "Our strength is not limitless." Maester Walken urged caution. "But if we ignore it, others may doubt our resolve." Gendry listened, weighing every word. At last he spoke. "Let us send riders. Scouts, not soldiers. Let them see we watch, but do not strike without cause." Sansa agreed, her voice cool and steady. "And we send a raven to the Riverlands and Vale. Let them know we expect their support, should trouble come. This peace is not ours alone to keep." So it was done. Scouts rode west, ravens took wing, and the castle settled back into its wary rhythm, prepared for the worst but determined to hope for the best. Winterfell's harvest feast came early, the great hall decked with garlands, every bench filled with laughter. Alysanne took her first steps to roaring applause, tottering from her mother's arms into Gendry's waiting hands. The lords and ladies of the north raised their cups. The bards sang of spring's return and peace hard won, and Sansa watched her daughter dance among the banners. Wolf and stag twined as one. That night, after the last song was sung, and the fires banked low, Sansa stood at the window of her chamber, watching the stars. Gendry joined her, silent, the night wrapping them both in its hush. "She's growing fast," he whispered, arms slipping around her waist. Sansa leaned into him, heart full. "So is the realm. I hope we can keep it safe for her." Gendry's voice was fierce, gentle. "With you leading, with all of us together, I think we can." She looked up at him, eyes shining. "I believe it too. And if winter comes, as it always does, we'll face it," he promised. "Together." She rested her head on his shoulder, watching the dawn creep over the horizon. A new day blooming for House Stark. House Baratheon. And the world they had shaped from loss and hope, hammered bright on the anvil of their love. Ka. In the restless hours before dawn, Sansa found herself awake, her mind full of threads she could neither untangle nor set aside. The hall outside her chambers was still, the banners quiet, Alysanne sleeping peacefully in the cradle by the hearth. Sansa rose and paced the stones, listening to the deep hush of the castle. The way Winterfell seemed to breathe and sleep, ancient and alive. She poured water from a silver ewer and drank. Her thoughts 1,000 leagues away, moving from the Riverlands to the Westerlands, from the harvest to the hungry mouths winter would bring. She moved to the window, her hands curled around the chill of the stone, and looked out across the bailey, the yard lit by torches left burning through the night. She could see the shadowy shapes of the guards making their rounds, the distant outline of the smithy, where Gendry sometimes worked late, lost in the music of iron and fire. The weight of leadership pressed on her shoulders, familiar now, a mantle she wore not only for herself, but for all those who looked to her for protection, justice, hope. The wind rattled the glass. Somewhere below, a hound barked, followed by the brief shout of a stable hand quieting the animal. Sansa remembered her father, his patient gaze and heavy silences, the way he would sit at this very window on winter mornings, watching the north wake. She wondered if he had ever felt alone, even surrounded by family and bannermen, if the weight had pressed him into his quiet strength, or if it had simply become a part of his soul. She missed him fiercely, missed her mother, her brothers, the easy laughter and warmth of a home she had never truly known until it was gone. Yet there was new life here too, joy and possibility flowering in unexpected places. She heard it in the cries of her daughter, the laughter of the children tumbling in the snowdrifts by the kennels, the busy voices in the market square, the careful words of lords at council table. She saw it in Gendry's pride as he watched Alysanne toddle across the floor, in the stubborn resolve of Arya, who had returned more often now, ever the wild shadow on Winterfell's edge. Alysanne stirred, her small face pinched with a dream. Sansa crossed and lifted her, rocking her gently until she settled, breath even and soft. The child's warmth was a balm, the tiny heart thudding fiercely, a promise that what they built now would matter in years to come. A knock sounded, so soft Sansa almost missed it. She opened the door to find Arya, hair tousled, eyes glinting with mischief and weariness both. Sansa led her in, closing the door against the cold. "Couldn't sleep," Arya said, settling on the bench by the fire. Sansa shook her head, sinking down beside her. Alysanne nestled between them. There's always more to be done. The Reach grows restless, the Westerlands too. I wonder how long peace can truly last. Arya shrugged, poking the embers with a bit of iron. It never does, but it's worth fighting for, isn't it? Even if it's just for a season. Sansa met her gaze, steady and sad. Yes, especially for a season. They sat in silence, the flames painting their faces gold. Arya's presence was grounding, rooted in a wildness Sansa sometimes envied. She wondered if her sister would ever stay, truly stay. Or if Arya belonged to the road as much as Winterfell. Have you thought of teaching Alysanne to fight? Arya asked suddenly, a sly grin curling her mouth. She could hold a dagger before she holds a quill. Sansa laughed softly. Perhaps. But I'd rather she know when not to draw a blade. The world is full of sharp things. I want her to know the power of words, too. Teach her both then, Arya said. Let her choose which she wants when the time comes. The first pale streaks of dawn began to edge the sky. Arya rose, ruffling Alysanne's hair. I'll be gone by midday. There's talk of trouble near the twins, old Frey men stirring. Don't worry, I'll be careful. Sansa tried not to show her disappointment. Send word when you can. Arya nodded, her gaze softening. I will. And Sansa, be proud. The North is strong because of you. After she left, Sansa dressed and made ready for the day. She left Alysanne in the care of old Nan and stepped into the corridor, the air sharp and brisk. As she walked the halls, servants nodded. Lords and ladies rose from their seats. The respect they offered her, honest and deep. She stopped in the great hall, where Gendry was already seated at the long table, reading reports with Maester Wolkan. He looked up, his face splitting into a wide open smile. You're early. She slid into the seat beside him, reaching for his hand beneath the table. Arya came. She leaves today. He nodded, understanding. She'll come back. The day's council was long and heated. Reports had come of Lannister ships off the coast, their movements cautious but unmistakable. Lord Manderley insisted on strengthening the watch at White Harbor, while Gendry spoke of shoring up the forges and sending more arms to the western outposts. Sansa listened, weighing each argument, her mind already outlining letters she would send before the day's end. When the council broke, Gendry lingered. Do you ever wish it was easier? He asked softly, eyes earnest. She squeezed his hand. No, Dot. If it were easy, someone less careful might have done it and lost everything. And so, he chuckled, relief in his eyes. You're the best of us, Sansa. I just hope I can be worthy. She brushed a lock of hair from his brow, her affection gentle. You're more than worthy. You make the hard work bearable. The following week, as the days grew cooler, envoys arrived from the Vale, their banners silver and blue. Sansa met them in the solar, Alysanne crawling at her feet, Gendry standing at her right hand. Lord Royce's nephew, Sir Harlan, brought gifts of fine steel and a falcon for Alysanne, but his words were cautious. There is unease in the Eyrie, he admitted after pleasantries. Rumors of southern alliances, whispers of old debts. Lord Royce would see this peace kept, but he asks for assurance. The North's word that we will not be drawn into wars not of our making. Da. Sansa considered, then nodded. Lord Royce is wise. The North will not march unless the Vale is threatened, or unless the peace of the realm demands it. But let him remember, we are stronger together. Should he ever need us, Winterfell will answer. Sir Harlan inclined his head, seeming satisfied. He spent several days at Winterfell, watching the training, joining the hunts, his eyes always thoughtful. When he left, he took with him more than gifts. He carried tales of a united house, of a peace worth defending. That evening, as Sansa walked the Godswood, she found Gendry by the heart tree, deep in thought. He turned as she approached, a faint frown on his brow. Do you ever regret? He asked, voice low. Not the marriage, never that. But the choices, the burdens, the way every day brings more to carry. Menenda. She stood with him, her hand in his. Sometimes. But I think of Alysanne, of the children running in the yards, the lords who trust us, the hope in the eyes of our people. No crown, no peace, no future is won without cost. He traced the line of her jaw, his thumb gentle. You make it look easy. She laughed, honest and warm. It is never easy, but it is good. He kissed her then, beneath the blood-red leaves, the world falling away until only the two of them remained. As the harvest ended, Sansa made her rounds through the north, riding to White Harbor to meet with Lord Manderley, visiting Baratheon to judge a dispute between two minor lords, sending supplies and builders to a village recovering from a fire. Gendry joined her when he could, and their presence together brought reassurance. In every hall, she heard stories of the old days, of Robb, of Jon, of the wars and the endless winters, and she answered with tales of what was being built now, of how the wolf and stag had made a shield strong enough to shelter all. At each stop, Alysanne was carried in her arms or walked at her feet, the lords and ladies delighted by the child's curiosity and boldness. In White Harbor, she reached for a hound's tail and laughed when it wagged. In Baratheon, she tottered to the dais and plucked a berry from the lord's own table, to the astonishment and delight of the guests. Winter came early, the snows swirling down from the mountains, blanketing roads and fields. Sansa ordered new stores opened for the hungry, fuel for the cold, work for the idle. The small folk built sleds, clearing paths through the drifts, gathering in the great hall for songs and stories, safe within the walls. One evening, Arya returned, cloak dusted with frost. She brought news. The Freys had stirred, but found little support. The Lannister cousin had retreated, bested by cold and watchful eyes. The peace, though battered, had held. They feasted that night, the hall warm with laughter. Arya sparred with Gendry, beating him in 3 passes, then let Alysanne climb on her back to the delight of the gathered children. Sansa watched them, joy softening the ache in her chest, knowing the world could still surprise her. Later, as the castle slept, Sansa walked the empty corridors, the hush broken only by the echo of her own footsteps. She paused at the heart tree, its eyes red in the moonlight, and laid her hand against the cold bark. "Thank you," she whispered, though she was not sure to whom. The lands, the old gods, the land itself, for this moment, for hope. Nenshaw. She thought then of the long road ahead, the storms that would surely come, the battles yet to be fought, the children yet to be born. She thought of Alysanne's laughter, Gendry's steadfastness, Arya's wild grace. She thought of all she had lost, and all she had gained, and felt the future unspooling before her. Fragile, uncertain, but hers to shape. And as the first light of morning broke over Winterfell, painting the snow in rose and gold, Sansa Stark, Lady of Winterfell, Lady Baratheon, mother and queen in all but name, smiled, ready to greet whatever the new day would bring. A.K. The sky was awash in pale gold as Sansa walked the ramparts of Winterfell, the crisp autumn air turning her cheeks pink beneath the fur-lined hood of her cloak. Below her, the castle bustled, a miniature city waking with the sun. Traders' carts rolled in through the gates, their wheels crusted with the first frost. Maids carried baskets of apples up from the cellars. The blacksmith's hammer rang, joined by the far-off shouts of boys at their drills. Every sound was a piece of home, every breath a reminder of what had been won, and what might yet be lost. Sansa paused, gazing beyond the walls to the patchwork of fields. Golden stubble gleamed where the wheat had been reaped, and in the distance, the Barrowland hills rose in gentle waves beneath a drift of crows. Somewhere, Gendry was inspecting the new dam on the White Knife, a project he'd taken a personal interest in as soon as the first snows melted. He had spoken to her the night before, brimming with plans, of irrigation channels, of millstones cut from southern granite, of roads packed so smooth that even the great lords of the Reach would be jealous. She smiled, thinking of the change in him. How he'd grown from the blacksmith's bastard to a lord who bent his strength to the land as much as to the forge. The men he led had grown to trust him not just for his hammer, but for the quiet confidence with which he took their measure. The unshowy way he saw what needed doing and did it. Alysanne's laughter echoed faintly from the inner yard. Sansa looked down to see her daughter, a sturdy wild thing now, 3 years old, racing after Lady Lyanna Mormont, who had become her most devoted shadow. Lyanna let herself be caught, falling theatrically onto a heap of leaves, and Alysanne crowed in triumph, brandishing a stick as if it were needle. Arya's old sword. Sansa watched, pride and a bittersweet ache mixing in her chest. She remembered her own childhood before the wolves began to fall, before the South had swallowed her innocence. She wondered what kind of world Alysanne would inherit. All she could do was make it safer, a little more just, day by day. She turned and continued her walk, the stone cold beneath her gloved hand. The wind carried the scents of wood smoke and roasting chestnuts, mingled with the sharp tang of winter coming on. It also brought with it news, ravens arriving daily with tidings from every quarter of the realm. In the solar, Gendry's reports waited for her. He returned at midday, his cheeks red from the cold arms and cloak dusted with river mud. "Dam's holding," he said, kissing her lightly, mindful of the counselors just beyond the threshold. "Should see us through the worst of spring. The new mill's nearly done too, and we've enough stone left to patch the old tower's wall." He looked tired, but content. Sansa pressed his hand. "And the stewards? No trouble?" He shook his head. "Old Donald grumbles, but that's his way. They'll follow, so long as you keep your promise about the grain." "I always do," Sansa replied. Together, they settled into the rhythm of ruling, listening to disputes, judging matters of tithes and boundaries, sending word to lords as far as Bear Island and as near as the Winter Town. Sansa learned to read every face at her table. She saw the greed that still lingered in some, the old grudges waiting for a weakness. She met these with firmness, with a calm courtesy that brooked no insult. Gendry, for his part, dealt with the men who brought him their broken plows and bad tempers, using reason and sweat to win their respect. Together, they presented a front as unyielding as the gates of Winterfell. But the peace was not without cracks. In late autumn, a messenger arrived from White Harbor with a tale of ships seen off the coast. Lannister red and gold, but flying strange banners. Lord Manderley's letter was full of cautious hope. He trusted that no invasion would come, but he asked for more armsmen all the same. "We'll send them," Sansa decided. "And if the ships prove hostile, we'll have enough warning to bar the gates and light the beacons." Alysanne was sitting on Gendry's knee during the council, wide-eyed as the lords argued. She watched the faces around her as if she already understood something of power, of what it meant to be born between wolf and stag. After, she wandered to the window, her small hands pressed to the cold glass. "What do the banners mean, Mama?" she asked. Sansa knelt beside her, wrapping an arm around her. "They tell the world who we are. They remind us of where we come from, and what we must protect." "Then do I." Alysanne considered this, brow furrowed. "Will I have a banner?" "One day, if you wish. But for now, you are the best of both. Wolf and stag, north and south." Alysanne grinned, chasing Lyanna out to the yard again, stick raised high. As the weeks passed, Sansa worked late into the night, dictating letters to Maester Wolkan. She brokered trade with the Reach for apples and honey, arranged marriages for minor houses eager to tie themselves to her cause. She listened to tales of unrest in the Riverlands, to rumors of a new sellsword company gathering in Old Town, and always she prepared, quietly shoring up Winterfell's stores, training every able-bodied woman and boy in archery and arms. She found time, too, for her family. She watched Gendry teach Alysanne to ride, his strong hands guiding hers on the reins. She spent evenings in the Godswood, her daughter's head on her lap, reciting old stories of Lyanna and Ned, of the kings in the north, who ruled before the dragons ever came. Arya returned once more, bringing tales from the far south. A city of marble and fire, a storm off the summer sea, a knife won in a wager. She watched over Alysanne as fiercely as any wolf, her presence a comfort, a living reminder that family, however scattered, was never truly lost. Winter, when it came, was hard but not cruel. The people had enough food, the walls held firm, and the roads, though treacherous, were kept open by teams of villagers with shovels and axes. Sansa saw to it that no child went cold, that every widow received a basket of smoked fish and a jug of cider at midwinter. She walked the halls, listening to songs and laughter, sharing in the small joys of her people. On the longest night, she and Gendry stood on the battlements as snow drifted down, the world silent save for the distant howling of wolves. They watched the aurora flicker on the horizon, colors shifting above the treetops, and Sansa felt a peace settle over her, an understanding that the fight was not only for her own blood, but for all who called this place home. She leaned her head on Gendry's shoulder, his arm wrapped around her. "We've done well," he said quietly. "I never thought I'd live to see peace last this long." Sansa smiled, her heart full. It may not last forever, but it was ours to make, and ours to keep, for as long as we can. He turned, pressing a kiss to her brow. "And after us, Alysanne." "Shall be ready," Sansa replied. "She has the heart of a wolf and the strength of a stag." Gendry laughed softly. "And the will of a queen." Sansa watched the northern lights dance, her thoughts reaching forward to the future, to the children who would follow, to the battles not yet fought, to the joys and sorrows that life would bring. She was not afraid. She had known pain, had seen loss, had endured and prevailed. She was Lady of Winterfell, wife, mother, ruler, and she would meet whatever came with courage. In the months that followed, word came that the Lannister threat had ebbed. Their ships withdrew, wary of the alliance that bound the North and the Stormlands together. The Riverlands sent envoys of peace, eager to reopen the great roads and the bustling trade of old. The Reach sent more than apples, a library of rare books for Winterfell, silk banners to hang in the hall, casks of sweet wine for the next harvest. Alysanne grew stronger, learning to read at Sansa's knee, to ride and shoot and rule with kindness. Lyanna Mormont remained her guardian, fierce and proud, and even Arya, when she returned, taught the girl how to track a fox through the snow, how to stand quiet and brave before the world. On the eve of the harvest festival, Sansa stood in the Godswood with her family, Gendry at her side, Alysanne perched on his shoulders, Arya lounging at their feet, Lady Lyanna nearby, her gaze ever sharp. The Hearttree's face seemed to smile, red sap gleaming in the evening light. Sansa pressed her palm to the bark, whispering thanks for the peace she'd found, for the love that bound her house together. She looked at the faces around her, her daughter, her husband, her sister, her friend, and felt the old wounds in her heart ease. The years would bring new challenges, new joys and griefs, but for now, Winterfell was safe. The North was whole. The power forged between Baratheon and Stark, hammered and tempered by hope, had remade the realm, if not forever, then for this golden season. And for Sansa, that was enough. Okay. As autumn waned into the cusp of winter, Winterfell shimmered in a delicate quiet. Its stones rhymed with frost, the fields silver in the dawn light. Sansa woke early, the sky outside her window an expanse of pewter, soft with the promise of the season's first snow. The fire in the hearth had died to embers. She rose from the warmth of furs and wool, brushed her hand across Gendry's shoulder, broad and steady even in sleep, and moved silently to check on Alysanne. The child was curled in a nest of blankets, lips parted, one small fist clenching the plush wolf Arya had stitched for her. Sansa smiled, brushing a stray lock of dark hair from her daughter's brow, and felt her chest tighten with a fierce, almost aching love. She slipped a heavy gown over her chemise and moved into the corridor, finding the keep already alive with the subdued hush of morning. The cooks in the kitchen were kneading dough, the first trays of honey cakes rising warm in the ovens. The dogs in the yard yawned and stretched, paws skittering on icy flagstones. Through the windows she saw the first snowflakes falling, just a dust, not yet a storm, but enough to turn the world new. She found Gendry in the solar before dawn fully broke, poring over ledgers and maps, his hands marked with ink and soot. He looked up when she entered, his tired face softening. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. "Too much to plan," Sansa replied. "Always something, even in peace." He closed the ledger, rising to press a kiss to her cheek, the warmth of him banishing the chill she'd carried from her bed. They stood together for a moment, silent, finding strength in the simple fact of each other. The council met early. Maester Walken brought word of a sickness in the village south of the Barrowlands, a fever that had claimed 3 children and left half a dozen more coughing blood. Sansa's brow furrowed as she listened to the maester's report. "Send the best healers," she said at once. "Take supplies, honey, wine, willow bark. Enough for a fortnight." "I want reports every day," Gendry nodded. "And more guards to keep panic at bay. We can't risk the sickness spreading to Winterfell." Lyanna Mormont, grown into a commander to rival any old lord, grunted her approval. "We've handled worse. I'll go myself." "Ben?" Sansa smiled at her old friend's resolve. "Take care, Lyanna. The people will feel safer with you among them." Other business pressed. The grain stores inventoried, the harvest festival prepared. Disputes among the small folk heard and settled. It was nearly midday before Sansa escaped the press of responsibility and sought a moment alone. She walked the Godswood, boots crunching through leaves crusted with frost, her breath curling in the cold. She found herself drawn to the heart tree, as she always was, the ancient face watching with a quiet, knowing sorrow. She pressed her palm to the bark. In the hush, she remembered her mother's voice. "Pray if you wish, but know that the gods help those who help themselves." She whispered a blessing anyway. For Alysanne, for Gendry, for the North and its people. Alysanne and Lyanna found her there, the girl skipping ahead with a red cloak flying behind her. Lyanna striding at her side. "Mama, come see the snow," Alysanne called, cheeks flushed with cold and glee. Lyanna winked at Sansa. She woke half the household with her excitement. Sansa scooped her daughter up, nuzzling her neck as she squealed and wriggled. "You are a wild wolf, little one," she said, voice thick with happiness. They spent the morning in the Godswood, watching the snow fall heavier, until every branch was traced in white, and the ground beneath their boots crunched. Lyanna showed Alysanne how to track rabbit prints, how to read the wind, how to tell the difference between the caw of a crow and the cry of a jay. Sansa watched them, heart full, and let herself believe for a little while that all the world was safe and good. By midday, ravens arrived from the south. News of unrest in Old Town, where the faith was once more whispering against northern heresy, and a warning from the Riverlands that a band of exiled knights had taken to raiding outlying farms. Gendry met her in the solar, concern written on his face. "Another would be lord in the Riverlands," he said, rallying broken men behind him. "They have no cause but hunger and bitterness." Sansa took the letter, reading it twice before speaking. "Send coin, food, seeds for spring, and armsmen to the nearest villages. I won't let the war's orphans starve, or rise up against us because they've nothing left." Gendry nodded, rubbing a hand over his jaw. "You're generous." "We're prudent," Sansa replied. "Starving men will listen to any promise. But feed them, and they'll remember who helped them when the world was cold." He caught her hand, squeezing. "I'll go myself if you wish," a show of strength and care both. "Thank you," she said, eyes shining. The harvest festival went forward despite the snow. The yard was hung with lanterns, tables loaded with the last apples, casks of sweet cider and trays of honey cake. Children in wolf and stag masks darted through the crowd, Alysanne among them, shrieking with laughter as Lyanna pretended to chase her. The small folk toasted Sansa and Gendry, the lords feasted, and the walls echoed with music and song deep into the night. Arya arrived on the festival's eve, silent as ever. She had been gone for months, hunting in the far woods, learning what trouble brewed in the wild places of the realm. She entered the great hall in a swirl of cold air and the smell of pine. Her face wreathed in a rare smile as Alysanne ran to meet her. Sansa embraced her sister, holding her close. "You always come home when you're needed." Arya grinned. "Someone has to keep an eye on the wolves." The festival ended with Alysanne standing on the high table, voice ringing clear as she led the old northern song of the first winter, the crowd clapping in time. Gendry lifted her down, laughing, and kissed her brow. Sansa watched, tears in her eyes. Of joy, of gratitude, of longing for every Stark who had not lived to see this day. With the festival over, winter settled in earnest. Snow deepened, drifts piling against the walls. The world beyond the gates shrinking to the size of the castle and its village. Sansa and Gendry moved among their people, overseeing the division of grain, checking on the sick and the old, ensuring no one went hungry or cold. The lords of the north sent letters of thanks, gifts of furs and smoked meat, small tokens that meant more than gold in a world where survival was never guaranteed. Alysanne took to riding her pony through the yard, Lyanna always near, Arya watching from the shadows. She learned her letters at Sansa's knee, her sons at Gendry's desk, and her courage at the feet of the fiercest women Winterfell had ever known. One bitter night, as the wind howled around the keep and the snow rattled at the shutters, Sansa lay awake beside Gendry, watching the shadows dance on the ceiling. "Are you happy?" he asked quietly. She turned, surprised by the softness in his voice. "Yes, tired, grateful, sometimes afraid, but happy." He brushed her hair back, his touch gentle. "So am I." They spoke of the future, of other children, of Alysanne's inheritance, of the peace they hoped to keep, and the battles that might yet come. Sansa listened to the steady beat of his heart and thought of all the paths that had led her here, the pain, the loss, the courage it had taken to begin again. The months turned. Alysanne grew bolder, smarter, a match for any in the yard. The small folk came to Sansa with their troubles and their joys, bringing her honey cheese, the first green shoots of spring in clay pots for her window. Gendry's forges produced plows and swords, new hinges for the gates, arrowheads for every village. Peace did not last forever. It never could. Word came of new alliances in the south. Marriages brokered between old enemies, gold flowing from the Lannisters to would-be sellsword kings. But the north, for once, was ready. The roads were watched. The halls were full. And the name Stark Baratheon meant something now. Not just power, but stability. A promise kept. On the first day of spring, Sansa stood on the battlements with Gendry and Alysanne, watching the sun melt the last of the ice from the roofs below. The heart tree in the Godswood was blushing red, sap running in the warmth. "We've built something good," Gendry said. Sansa took his hand, Alysanne between them, her small fingers squeezing theirs. "We'll keep building," she replied. For a moment, the world was still. A promise, a hope, a future unfurling beneath the clear blue sky. And Sansa Stark, Lady of Winterfell, Lady Baratheon, mother and wife, and queen in all but name, smiled as her daughter laughed, and the banners of wolf and stag snapped bright in the new spring wind.